A very good morning, dear students. I hope you all are doing good. Wake up, students. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning, sir.
Good morning, Namrata. Good morning, Sahiba.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Shivani.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I hope you all are doing good, with your family members. That's a good thing that
Yes.
there are very few cases now are being reported in Delhi, so its number is just getting down to tens only. So that is actually good. But things are, we need to take care because they are again planning to open up everything. Delhi has already planned it up, but we need to take care so that third wave, we can avoid third wave. That is not good. Anywhere has been reported in any of the nation, it's not been good. The third wave has never been good. So just take care. Okay, fine. Uh, just going back into a brief part to what we have discussed. It was very important component that we have talked about vermiculture and vermicomposting. So I've talked about that. It actually fastened the process of how the compost procedure can be made easier and faster. I have talked about the benefits that we can reap out of vermicomposting, but what about the limitations? पिछले lecture में when I was talking about before your test I was talking about there was some student who asked that, sir, what about the freezing temperatures? What about any other thing that can hamper the process? What are the limitations? I think Yuvraj asked it, and there are many limitations, but not limiting the use of vermicompost. So there are many limitations, but the process cannot be hampered and should not be hampered because the thing is the growing entrepreneurship, the skills that are being taken in small scale industries are being developed up. They are the reason for being providing employment to number of people. And there is no question about being urban or rural. So in rural areas also, you can have this facility and can aid to grow as an entrepreneurship. So that is a good thing about vermiculture and vermicomposting. Well, about the vermiculture, there was nothing very much big. What we have talked about is that, okay, the worms, they can multiply themselves in over 3 months or 4 months of period of time, and you can have another batch of the worms. But what is the limitation? How many worms are getting killed inside, or if the worm compost is not very well, is not going in a good way, obviously the number of worms that will be getting killed would be much more. So ultimately goal क्या था कि that we reap the compost, we reap the number of worms in order to have a sustainable harvest. Sustainable harvest means that कंपोस्ट का इतना अमाउंट आ रहा है कि you can feed to the farms, you can feed to the gardens, you can feed to the homes, and that number it actually matters. So there are some limitations about the vermicomposting procedure. These limitations are not limited only to the process, but to the output, to the labor that is being involved. There are certain limitations. Limitations, मैं बार बार ये word use कर रहा हूँ. What they are? You cannot use a very big heap. That is the major drawback. Big heap का मतलब है आप ऊंचाई ज़्यादा बढ़ा नहीं सकते हैं. Worms they'll be compressed, so that is not always good. And in order, if you cannot have heap like this, you need to increase the surface area in order to have say 1 meter high heap, and that to loosen. ऐसा नहीं है कि compressed 1 meter high है, but loosen 1 meter high मतलब 3 feet, यानी कि just below your just above your knee length. So that would be much in order to have the height of the heap. And the conversion rate, हमने worm की बात करी थी एसिनिया फेटिडा, तो फेटिडा में भी मैंने तब बात करी थी that it can take up almost 100% to its body weight, but the output is just 50%. So the process becomes slower. It becomes slower. Normally, जब worms की बात करी थी तो ये बहुत अच्छे worms थे, Acinia foetida, and it grows very well. Its output is good, and it actually grows in a wide range of temperature. It cocoons. It cocoons are very good in the sense that they can survive in freezing temperature also, though it's not a matter here in India. But still, I mean, these features, they made it a very good. But the problem was that how about the worms? How about, okay, we need to have a large surface area. Obviously, if the surface area is getting increased, the number of worms will be increased. And again, that is the input. हाँ, ये बात है कि हमें कंपोस्ट के जैसे we need not to turn up the pile, but still in order to have a large surface area, you need to spread, you need to have a large land area in order to have it. So vermicompost on one hand is good in number of ways, is more superior in the components that we have and compost teas that are being produced, the worm teas that is being produced out of it. And you actually can have the worms farm as well along with practicing vermiculture. But if it is quicker, it needs to have an input. It requires more labor. Labor किस sense में? Compost के process में, the waste is being decomposed, it's being converted into the compost. Take it up, have it, now dry it up, it's done. There is no manual labor that is actually being involved, but here, okay, go for the process. The process is being done, separate the worms are separated, dry it up. Once it is dried and then stored properly, it has to be stored because of the pests and other diseases that may come up in that area that needs to be taken care of. So perhaps most importantly, there need to be more resources that need to be added up in order to have vermicompost. That is the major disadvantage. But apart from all this, the quality of the compost that is coming up, that is more advantageous in number of ways. So that has been proven by research. So we'll be talking about that as well. Okay. Then we talked about why do we need to have a good input sources. कंपोस्ट के प्रोसेस में जनरली एक हीप बनाई जाती है. हीप में मैंने बताया था a few centimeter bedding needs to be done. Put some animal manure, mixed it with the organic matter. On the top of it, create a 10 centimeter layer of this that mixture. Above it, put some manure as and a pre-composted mixture that is already having those worms, those not worms but bacteria and microorganisms that will act upon the lower layer. So that layer needs to be put up. But worms, we need to take care because worms, they are burrowers and they may go beneath the soil. We need to take care, we need to create that layer in a proper way. So that needs to be done. In order to have a bedding, there needs to be certain features that need to be taken care of. That is high absorbency. That is, the moisture content needs to be much more in comparison to a normal compost process because moisture is ultimately is required by the worms. So that high absorbency is a factor that needs to be taken care of because worms, they actually breathe through their skin, and if they are clogged, they'll die. So that needs to be taken care of. The bedding that you have created, there needs to be enough pores in order to have that. Then the potential of the worms that you have actually taken up should be good enough so that worms, they are producing more amount rather than being getting killed. And then taking care of the carbon nitrogen mixture in order to have the proper bedding material. So what bedding material I have talked about? There was manures that can be added up. There was peat moss that can be, okay, straws, haze that comes out directly from the field, that is dried up material. Then you can put up bark also, papers from the municipal waste, papers, I'm not talking about the plastics, but papers, yes, they can be put up. And then any paper sledge, slurry, that kind of material, hardwood chips, या softwood के sawdust है, they can be taken up. Dry leaf materials, banana leaves, they have large surface area, can be put up beneath in order to have a good bedding. So that needs to be properly taken care of in order to have a good worm culture. And then the food, the content that you are adding up, that you will feed, because once you have created the bed, you will now put the resources that will be converted into the compost. Remember, 1 ton, 1 ton of the waste material that you have feeded will be converted over the say period of 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months of time by the worms into compost will enough for 300 square feet area. I repeat, 1 ton of the waste that is being provided to the worms in order to convert it into the compost would be enough to feed 320 square feet of area. So that is not very big enough area that will be covered. So it will be like uh, 20 feet by 16 feet, 20 feet long and 16 feet wide. So that would be the area that would be covered by 1 ton, 100 kgs of compost. So 100 kgs of waste that is being provided to the worm. So you actually need to take care of the mixture that you are mixing up so that you have the process done in a very faster rate. So you actually feed the worms and you feed the worms with their, because they have some perception of the food. उनको ज़्यादा नाइट्रोजन कंटेंट भी चाहिए, बहुत ज़्यादा कार्बन नहीं चाहिए. Otherwise, in normal compost process, the ideal composting mixture that we have talked about was 30 units of carbon and 1 unit of nitrogen. But it can be managed that you can go up to 35 units and 1 to 2 unit of nitrogen. So that can be managed in compost. But here, worms, they have that perception. 20 for the carbon, say 1 for the nitrogen. But the reduced production of the carbon will actually reduce the quality of the carbon content ultimately. Carbon content utna hi kam hoga because they have that perception. So why not to provide the food that will actually lead to the formation of carbon as well as nitrogen ultimately. So the worms, they need to be provided with the food that is good enough for them. Animal manure. Manure एक बहुत अच्छा food था जिसके बारे में मैंने बात करी थी. उसमें cattle manure, poultry manure या बहुत सारे ऐसे sheep के animals, rather than all the animals they can be feeded up except rabbit manures because they are very rich in nitrogen content, so they are not very good because that is very much for them to have. Then you can have seaweeds, you can have pre-composted waste. Then any fish or poultry remains that are coming up. So they all serve as good material. They'll be provided up a protein content to the worms that is not actually is required, but they'll ultimately from the proteins they'll feed upon the nitrogen that is required for their growth, and ultimately the leach that will be coming out of the worms would enrich the humus soil, that compost would ultimately be enriched. Then okay, that was about bedding, and then we talked about the food, and then moisture. Moisture मैंने पहले ही बताया था worms को एक enriched moisture चाहिए, so they need to have a good moisture ratio. So that was very high. That was very high. It was very high means 50% से अगर कम है, that will prove lethal to the worms. So that is not always good in order to have that less than 50% ratio. So ideally it should be 80% of the moisture content because that will actually will provide a more rigorous way for the worms in order to have that burrowing process, because water जो है वो उनको slippage provide करेगा, so they need not have to work much in order to seep down. So that needs to be provided. A very good care needs to be taken of aeration. कंपोस्ट में जब हमने बात करी थी तो हमने बोला था कि पाइल को यू एक्चुअली नीड टू रोटेट दैट पाइल, बट इन वर्मी कंपोस्ट पाइल रोटेट करने की जरूरत नहीं होती. इसमें फायदा नुकसान दोनों हैं. फायदा तो यही है कि लेबर बहुत ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व नहीं होती. नुकसान क्या है? कैनॉट क्रिएट अ हीप. यू कैनॉट हैव अ बिग हीप because ultimately the worms will die under that pressure. So large surface area, so there is no manual that is being involved. So aeration, obviously good aeration will be there, but just imagine the last time that we have talked about in a normal compost process, वो जो wood chips हैं या sawdust है या leaves हैं, they actually need to be pre-processed for the worms. तो वो pre-processed compost is very good for the worms. So that will actually will provide more aeration capacity inside that material. So will actually the feed will come up in a very good way. So that needs to be taken care of. And then temperature. पिछली बार भी ये क्वेश्चन था कि टेम्परेचर, मैंने बताया था कि range बहुत अच्छी है. So worms, they have a good range. This Acinia fetida, they had a good range to grow in an ample range of temperature. So they can actually survive in 10 degrees to even to freezing temperatures and to as high as 35 degrees Celsius. So that actually provides the range, a good range where the worms, they can grow very well. But a hospitable rather than a hostile environment should be avoided. Hospitable environment उनको देना चाहिए ताकि वो नरिश होके grow करें, because ultimately we want to have the culture as well from the worms. So they'll actually replicate, they'll divide, and you will have more number of worms out of it. So that needs to be taken care of. Then okay, pH या salt है या कोई भी unwanted material है, so that always needs to be taken care of, because ultimately worms उस environment में they won't be able to survive, they won't be able to grow up, so that needs to be taken care. So okay, the most important thing in the limitation part was the pests and diseases that may affect the vermiculture, that may affect the vermicompost process. They are not subjected to disease that are caused by microorganisms, but certain insects, bigger insects like red mites, or maybe certain animals, they may actually feed upon them. So they needs to be taken care of. So the first of such kind pests are moles, birds, centipedes, ants, mites. They all need to be taken care of, because they actually not only cause the problem in the open air fields, but they actually attack the worms, can eat them up, because that is a good food for them. So they can actually feed upon them, and the vermicompost process will not take place. The second important thing about centipedes, they are not good at all for the worm beds, because if they are there, they are insect pests. So they'll come up to the surface, destroy it, and may produce some harmful substances in the compost that is not good at all for the plants. Then ants, they are actually are more particularly attracted to sugars, and you actually, when you are putting up the beds of the these worms, make sure that you are not adding any sugary stuff to them, because otherwise ants will come and will attack that part. And then mites need to be taken care of. White mites, they come up, red mites, they come up, and they will actually, well, economically impact the growth of the worms. They suck the blood of the worms, and they can quickly suck fruits or fluids that is coming out from cocoons. तो ये इस चीज़ का ध्यान रखना बहुत ज़रूरी होता है. pH का ध्यान रखें, and you can add calcium carbonate in order to take proper care of the pH, so that these kind of mites, they may not come up. So that is very well need to be taken care of, the pests and diseases that may come up. So we have talked about not much about the vermicomposting process, about the methods. So the methods, they need to be मैंने बताया था, worms को grow करना एक art है. Art is that you are providing that hospitable environment to the worms, so that they keep on doing their process. So proper care needs to be taken for that. What I mean by that proper care means कि वो शेड में है, कवर्ड है, ओके, तीन तरफ से कवर्ड है, फिर ऊपर शेड है. ये चीजें जरूरी ध्यान रखना इसलिए जरूरी है, बिकॉज we need to take care of everything. We are not just feeding the worms with the food in order to have the compost, but we need to take care of the worms from anything that is coming from out, be it be physical conditions like temperature, climate, anything, and be it be any biological means, biotic stress that may come up, like worms or any other pest mites that may grow up, that may hamper the process. But normally the process is you can have a windrow method. Windrow method is the batch process, and then there is a bin method, that is the continuous process. Windrow method में आप layers लगा देते हो, you put up the leaves just beneath, at the level of the soil, put up some mixture, and then you feed the worms. So that needs to be properly covered. Make sure no worms, no rodents, they are coming on it, and let it grow inside. So that will actually, that windrows will actually this method will allow the compost to come up. It's in a very natural way, but obviously the labor involvement is much more, and proper care needs to be taken care of. So that needs to be well established in order to have that, and it's generally being practiced in many of the farms who are not actually practicing the vermiculture, but they can have compost out of it. So that needs to be well taken care of. And then there is a continuous method जो मैंने दिखाया था आपको कि worms already उस mixture में हैं, they have feeded upon that mixture. You just need to put up another layer of that mixture so that worms may come up and attack, add another batch of the worms उसी के ऊपर, और नीचे से you actually have the trays from where you can leach out the leachate. जो warm tea होती है आप उसको निकाल सकते हैं, you can have it in through the tap that is being installed in a bin system. तो bin होता है एक बहुत बड़ा, उसमें trays होती हैं, you put up the layer, another layer and third layer, and you put up the worms in all the 3 layers. तो जैसे ही layers process होती हैं, the leachate will come down from that layer, from that tray, और leachate नीचे आते आते it will keep on adding to the next layer. Once the tray is ready, take out that tray, add fresh tray with another material, and so you can actually have a continuous batch. More the number, more the quantity of the batch is required in one go, so you will need to increase the size of that bin that is being created. So those bins, they are actually available in the marketplace. Leaving it all aside, you can actually create the boxes of maybe a wooden material that serves a very good purpose. So that will actually protect the worms from all the sides. Make sure that heap, उसमें जो wooden box में heap होगी वो बहुत ज़्यादा बड़ी ना हो, या आप उसके बांस को, उसकी sides को you can cover it up with the leaves, and once it is done, put the bedding with the leaf, dry leaf material, put the compost mixture, the waste mixture, and then add the worms and cover it with sawdust so that worms, they keep on have their process inside. Just take care of the water content, aeration process, keep on loosening the stuff. Once it is done, worms will do their part. So that is another good method. So 3 methods they are there. So we can have bed bins, we can have stacked bins in order to have the continuous process, and windrow method where the batches, in batches they are being produced. Just hold a guys second. Uddam. So that needs to be taken care of. Okay. And one step ahead, in order to have the worm culture, basically, worms, ideally they are being grown, they grow in a batch in one of the compost mixture. But apart from that, worms, they can actually be multiplied. So need to have that bin, that cage, where you will put animal manure, feed the worms, let them grow. वो केज जो होता है वो मैश का बना होता है, सो दैट एरिएशन की उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम ना हो, पानी आप ऊपर से उनको प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, so there will be no problem of the moisture. You provide the best food to the worms, and you actually have the option to rotate that bin. So what is actually being coming out of that, you can have the vermiculture, worms culture. So they'll be produced, they'll be multiplied in numbers. So that is a good process that you can actually have out of that part. So another good thing is on-farm practice. On-farm practice means, can we use the worms directly on farms? Definitely they can be used up. The problem comes when the secondary infection of the worms come to the plants. Plants में बहुत सारे ऐसे worms होते हैं, nematodes हैं, which actually have the ability to transmit the viruses and other diseases. They are not at all good. But worms, they are friendly. Worms, they will not feed on the plant roots itself, but they can be fed to the soil, and they can actually add to the humus water holding capacity. But it's not always good, because when it rains, those worms, they come out and then they look for places in order to move here and there, and then they may feed upon any other food that is being provided outside. So the value of vermicompost has been mentioned. On the other end, that compost that is being produced in a way that we have talked about the processes has been proven really very beneficial. ये बात हमने स्लाइड्स के शुरू में बात करी थी, जब मैंने बताया था you actually can have a good quality of the compost that is coming out, that is being produced. Good quality means the components, the mixture that you will have at the end of the organic content would be much higher than the normal compost. उसमें खाद्य जो products होंगे, NPK will be rich, manganese, copper, sulfate, iron. So all those components they'll be mixed up and will provide a very good. So that value of vermicompost has been mentioned very clearly in literature. It has been reported. So the level of plant available nutrients is much higher. That has been proven by research that vermicomposted manure has higher nitrogen availability in comparison to any other composted manure on the weight basis. मतलब अगर आप 1 kg vermicompost दे रहे हो, the nitrogen content would be much higher because of the ability of the worms to convert higher nitrogen ratio, higher nitrogen content. They'll keep on adding nitrogen. So that is always good. That has been proven very beneficial to the plants. Second, to the microorganisms that are growing inside the roots. वो root nodules में जो microorganisms that they are growing, that we call as good microbiota, or we call good microorganisms, that compost will actually provide a good way for these. These are microbes which are much better to be microbially active, and they provide a good quality to the plants, and they are taken up by the plants in order to have a good quality planting system. So that is what is being said, that the vermicompost will not only improve the quality of the soil, but will aid the plants in their proper plant growth medium. Then ability to stimulate plant growth, that is very important. प्लांट की ग्रोथ को अगर कोई चीज, because ultimately the effect of the organic content of the compost would be adding to the plant. So that has been proven by research that adding vermicompost has a tremendous improvement in the plant growth. That improvement in the plant growth will actually aid in the plant rigorosity, and it will defend number of pests and diseases. तो वो जो रेजिस्टेंस का मैकेनिज्म है, जो डिफेंस है, वो तभी हो पाएगा जब प्लांट ही बहुत अच्छी कंडीशंस में ग्रो कर रहा है. So that has been proven by research. Then ability to suppress disease. If the disease has come up, so one, we use the term that it is disease resistant variety, कि ये तो भाई resist ही कर देगी, disease हो ही नहीं पाएगा. So in that way, that genetics is not at all good, because true to type loss हो जाता है. But coming to the quality of the plant, when we talk about disease tolerant plants, tolerance means genetically not much modified, but they are fit enough to fight the disease. So ये property जो है, that is really very good in order to fight the disease. So the disease in natural way, it will come up. Once it has come up, plant इतना काबिल हो चुका होगा that it will have enough of that material in it, because it will be flourishing very well. It will not be surviving, but it will be flourishing. So it will have that tendency to resist the disease if it is coming up. So that has been again been proven up by research. And last is ability to repel the pest. पेस्ट अगर आ रहे हैं, वही बात है कि अगर बहुत अच्छी क्वालिटी के प्लांट्स हैं जो ग्रो कर रहे हैं, तो they have the ability to repel those pests. Another finding was that has been proven by research that plants that are very good in their growth, they actually release some chemicals and materials that will keep the pest away. Otherwise, what will happen? Plants, they are not able to cope up because they have to carry on with their metabolism part. वो अपने मेटाबॉलिज्म को कंप्लीट करने के लिए उसी तरफ ध्यान देते हैं, और उतने टाइम में कोई और पेस्ट आके, इट्स जस्ट सिमिलर टू द immune system that is working in humans. If we are occupied in tackling one of the disease, हम उसको टैकल कर रहे हैं, उतनी देर में दूसरी इन्फेक्शन दे कम अप. So if the plant is fit enough, it will release more and more chemicals. More and more chemicals means natural plant metabolites. Chitin है, callose है, callose deposition among the plasmodesmata layers को बहुत छोटा कर देते हैं, and the pathogens they never cross that layer. So that callose, it's a defense material. RNA silencing के components increase हो जाते हैं. That all they have been proven by research. So vermicompost can be considered as a non-toxic method of pest control. So that is really very good. So with this, I think we have ended up with the this vermicompost. I'll just look into the syllabus. Okay, we have talked about the vermicomposting. We have talked about introduction to vermiculture. We have talked about the worms, their biology, talked about the earthworm farming today itself, and then enemies of earthworms. So how the pests and diseases they may come up, we need to take care of that. Economic importance of the vermicompost have already been discussed in the class. Conventional commercial vermicomposting process. I've already told you about the windrow method that normally can be practiced at farms. And if you want to go for a continuous batch, you need to have that equipment. So then consideration about economical aspects have already been talked about. The capacity of the conversion rate, that is the first thing. The worms batch that you need to put up every time in order to have the vermiculture process. Worm ka culture agar karna hai, you need to have that equipment as well. So the economical aspects they have been considered very well. Conversion rate कितना है, 1 टन कितने में कन्वर्ट हो रहा है, माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स कितनी देर में एक्ट कर रहे हैं, कंपोस्टिंग का प्रोसेस बहुत अच्छे से चल रहा है. So all those limitations along with the process they have been discussed of. So anything that you want to know out of this module, the second module, you may please ask, guys. Hello. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any question, Adhish, Ayushi, Sam?
No, sir.
Sir, I had a question, if it's
Yes,
okay.
Manaswini.
Sir, so you know how you had mentioned that you need 1 ton of the compost to fertilize around 320 acres, right?
Yeah.
So, like you said, that's not a lot. So, is there any way to, I don't know, maximize that where, let's say just for 1 ton, you can increase the area that it fertilizes? Is there anything
Area
like
can
that
be
that's
increased.
possible?
Manaswini, area, I mean the amount of the compost that will be generated can be increased, but obviously then see the input cost. Not only the cost, but the labor that will be involved, the batch will have to be increased, not in this area size, but okay, if you keep on continuously feeding the worms, so proper care need to be taken uh, in order to have that batch again ready in the continuous process. So with just imagine 1 ton, that is 100 kg of the waste material, उसको अगर हम surface area में रखते हैं, so we need to have that very large space. Or albeit, on the other hand, if you have, okay, your question is that can we increase that? Yes, definitely it can be done, but then you need to have pre-processed compost. If that is being provided to the worms, their activity would be fast. The continuous batch will start coming out in a very faster rate. Then definitely the compost amount could be increased. Manaswini.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Anybody else for the question? Namrata, Nandini, Nehal, Rupal. Sahiba, Sanjana. Yes, Nehal. Shivani, Tridev, Vivek, Yukta, Yuvraj. किसी का कोई सवाल नहीं है?
Sir,
Yes, Nehal.
other than earthworm, what are the alternative that we can use in vermicompost?
See, vermicompost is actually coming out of the worm culture. It's a worm-based compost. So you cannot have anything else, because apart from worms, there are number of worms that are available, but earthworms, they've been considered as the best because they have that natural tendency. That is why they've been said as best friend for the planet. But you cannot use any other worm, because the output that they'll have, say I talked about just centipede, they are the they are just kind of worms. So if that is coming out, if that worms they are coming out, that will actually will hamper the process, because certain poisonous substances, they'll be released out of those worms that are not good for the plants. So nothing else. So that is why vermiculture means that Acina fetida or the African night crawlers or any other third quality of, but they need to be earthworms. Nehal.
Okay, sir.
संजना, तन्वी, त्रिदिव, विवेक, युक्ता, युवराज, किसी का कोई सवाल है?
Sir, I had a question. So you explained that vermicomposting is basically the best way to provide enrichment to the soil, right? So uh, why don't we replace all other types of composting uh, with this vermicomposting? Why don't we
Okay,
use just only
Yukta,
this?
that is again the question that is put up another way around, that we consider the benefits of having vermicompost, but what about the limitations? I've talked about the economic impact that will be there, because you need to have that input. You need to have those worms batch every time. Okay, the numbers will be increased after some time, but you need to have enough land area in order to have that compost. And the most important thing is, in order, if you want to have that continuous process, the input of the equipments which is not there in a normal compost process will not be there. Second very important thing that comes in economic consideration, Yukta, is that worms, they have the perception of the food that is not there in a normal composting process, because microorganisms, जैसा मटेरियल आपने प्रोवाइड करा है, नाइट्रोजनस है, कार्बोनस है, or any other material that is being added to it, that type of microorganisms will come up in order to degrade that matter into simplest. But here you have one kind of worms that have the perception over the food, and they need to provide that hospitality so that they grow very well and can have that conversion. And सबसे बड़ी लिमिटेशन इसकी यही है कि सबसे बड़ी लिमिटेशन इसकी यही है दैट द हीप साइज कैन नॉट बी इंक्रीज्ड, Yukta. So that is a very big economic consideration to take care of in order to have a normal composting process or vermicomposting. So these factors make this vermicomposting a bit of the limitation.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Nonetheless, Yukta, just add to it, it doesn't mean that, okay, vermiculture cannot be practiced or should not, but needs to take appropriate in a very appropriate manner in order to have that process done for you. So that needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, it's all fine.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So okay, anybody else for the question? Namrata, Shivani, Tanvi, Sahiba, Vivek. Okay, nobody is there. So, guys,
So,
just
can I ask my questions? Like,
sure, please.
can I ask my questions tomorrow? Actually,
Yes,
today
go ahead.
there was very bad network issue, so my call was even again dropping.
Okay. Ishita, I didn't get you. What you were saying?
So, am I audible now?
Yeah, you were audible.
So, So can I ask my questions like tomorrow or like day after class, day after tomorrow? Because like my network, I have very bad network, and my call
Okay.
was dropping again and again.
No issues, no issues. Ishita, I'll suggest you two things. You can ask your questions anytime, anytime. There will be no issues. I am there. I'll be happy to have your queries resolved at any time. But second thing that is very important is try to have improvement in your network quality. Okay, this is online. That is what is being going on, and it's always good that अगर आप सुनोगे नहीं तो you will not get anything. And that is very important.
Yes,
That
sir.
is the most important part that you have now for online classes. तो ये कुछ दिन के लिए है, but try to have improvement in your network quality. Try to have
So actually there was some family issue, so I'm out of my station, out of the station. I have Wi-Fi at my place, so it doesn't. So like at that moment there's no issue, but like right now I'm out of station due to some family issues. Sorry, sir.
no issues, no issues. But anyways, Ishita, you can put up your queries at any time, anytime. Maybe
Yes, thank you, sir.
not over online class, but any message, any email, any way you feel feasible like. Okay.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay. Fine. So guys, at the end, would again compile everything once again. So what we have covered as of now from the module one, we have talked about composting. We have talked about overview of the composting process, biology of the composting, controlling the composting process. So for controlling, we need to know the process first. What factors affect the composting process? Moisture, aeration, pile shape, size of the material, temperature, and obviously the time. Then we have talked about system, methods, and equipment. Guys, just hold for a second. Yeah. And then for equipment, and then we have talked about site selection and design. सबसे important part जो युवराज ने raise करा था, limitations of composting. Then at last we have talked about waste and odor management. So first module has been covered. And then we have talked about vermicomposting, introduction, earthworm biology, farming, enemies of earthworms, definition, economic importance, conventional commercial vermicomposting, and considerations about economical impact of this activity. So these two modules, they have been covered up. Any question out of these two modules, anytime you people may ask anything, and anybody interested to have that activity being done, so we can have that session, an extra session, if you want to go for such kind of activity. So, and at last, we'll be left with third module that is all about mushroom, because it's this course is not about just about organic composting and mushroom cultivation, but a more of entrepreneurship kind of a skill based course. So what you can actually achieve out of this part. In the next semester, you will have the best thing. You will have another plant tissue culture based course. That is again application of plant tissue culture. बहुत interesting है. So again, that is a very good subject. How you actually just being a life science graduate, what things you can actually achieve out of your life science studies in order to have that uh, business skills, in order to have business setup, not a very large scale, not a very profitable, but though a good business. So because all you will be getting everything out of waste, total waste. तो वो इनपुट ही कम हो जाता है. मैंने पिछली बार भी बात करी थी साइकिल अगरबत्ती, नॉट साइकिल बट फूल अगरबत्तीस, they actually have started from flowers that are being discarded by the temples, and they dried those flower materials and they have that. So waste is actually being converted. Otherwise those flowers, they were just thrown into the water bodies, not contaminating the water bodies, but still they can be used up in order to convert it into a good product. And the fool people, they say that आप भगवान पे चढ़े हुए फूलों की अगरबत्ती बना के उसको जलाते हो तो वो creates a positive environment. So religiously, if you are actually towards it, so that is good thing. And at last, in the third module, we'll be talking about mushroom cultivation. Mushrooms क्या हैं, उनकी biology क्या है, applied mushroom biology. That is just to reap out of the mushroom cultivation. That is applied part, not the basic part. Then human health, how it can be improved through mushrooms. What are the mushroom cultivation and production processes? Then nutritional and medicinal properties क्या हैं? Then nutraceuticals, what benefits you can actually have out of the mushroom in order to have the nutrient products being ready up out of the mushroom. Then what are the different phase of mushroom cultivation? Harvest करने के बाद उनका ध्यान कैसे रखना है? That is why mushrooms, they are covered up in a packets. Those if you have seen, they are in a plastic boxes covered up, so that post-harvest handling needs to be taken care of. Economics of mushroom cultivation, about the investment and reap, that is economics of mushroom cultivation. And finally, which mushrooms they need to be cultivated, because more than 95% of the mushrooms, they are not edible at all. They are poisonous actually. So I'll stop here. अभी भी किसी का अगर कोई सवाल है, कोई कुछ जानना चाहता है, पूछना चाहता है, please, any one of you may please ask. So, okay, nobody is there. Just the last part for today. I'll just taking up a part of the quiz for you people. I'll be speaking out the name. Try to answer that question. So I'll start with Sam. 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 जो लोग respond नहीं कर रहे हैं, they'll be marked as absent. I'll repeat, those who are not responding will be marked as absent. So the first name is Sam. Okay, then Adhish.
Yes, sir.
Adhish, windrow method क्या था? Windrow.
So windrow.
Yes.
Sir. So was it by piling up the organic matter? We
Yeah. In the
in
farm,
agriculture.
in the open fields. So that is just creating the piles.
Yes, sir.
Fine. Athoiba. Athoiba. Ayushi.
Yes, sir.
Okay, no question for you. Ishita. Ishita. Hello.
So, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. So could you tell me by what the warm compost can be covered up with?
Yes, sir. Sir, it is sir, that compost is being covered by polythene.
Okay, fine, Ishita. That would be enough. Janvi.
Yes, sir.
Janvi, what should be the ideal moisture content in the vermicompost process? Hello, Janvi. Manaswini.
Yes, sir.
Manaswini, what
So
is
am
the
I
ideal
audible?
moisture content?
Sir, so just 1 second, sir. There's some problem with my Teams.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, so the ideal moisture content should be around 40%. So water needs to be added so that the worms can, because only if they are moderately moist, then the worms can continue their process, which is why I do, as you had mentioned, if it rains, then they come up to the top and can feed on the wrong
So it
materials
has
as
to
well.
be, ideally, it has to be, I'm just asking about the range of the moisture.
So I remember you saying that it should be around 40%.
It's 50. I told that if it's less than 50, it's not good for the worms. Namrita,
Yes, sir.
Namrita, what kind of worms are being used?
Pardon, sir.
What kind of worms are used in vermicomposting?
Sir,
साइंटिफिक नेम नहीं बता सकते तो एक कॉमन नेम बता दो. इतनी बार बोलता हूँ, इतनी बार नाम लिया मैंने. नंदिनी, Nandini, could you name the worm? Nehal,
Night crawler.
sorry, क्या बोला नेहल?
Sir, night crawler.
Night crawlers. Okay, yes, they can be used. Rupal, can you tell what are the best worms?
So, earthworms and manure worms and red worms can be the best for
Yes.
the
Okay.
vermicompost.
One common name you have taken up, that are red worms.
Yes.
Sahiba,
Yes, sir.
why red worms are good? Any one quality?
Sir, because tolerate, they have a high tolerance of environmental changes.
Fine, fine, Sahiba. Sanjana,
Yes, sir.
any other factor that you feel that is advantage?
So one was that they are highly tolerant to changing
Okay.
environmental
Any other?
condition.
Any other?
So they are good for vermicomposting. Uh, they are they help in the decaying of the organic matter.
At a faster rate.
Yes, sir.
See?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is a leachate? थोड़ा जल्दी बताओ.
What, sir?
लीचेट और वार्म टी क्या है बेसिकली?
Warm tea.
हम्म. शिवानी,
Yes, sir.
वार्म टी क्या है?
It's basically the liquid that flows from
फाइन.
worms.
ओके. तन्वी,
Yes, sir.
तन्वी, हाउ वर्मी कंपोस्ट इज बेटर देन ऑर्गेनिक कंपोस्ट? त्रिदेव,
Yes, sir.
त्रिदेव, वर्मी कंपोस्ट कैसे बेटर है?
So vermicompost is better than organic compost, I guess, because it has higher nitrogen, phosphorus
या ओके.
content.
ओके, फाइन. जस्ट वन पॉइंट. विवेक,
Yes, sir.
I just talked about one point about the cocoons. Cocoons का क्या फायदा है? Acina fetida के, जो red worm है, जो which are good quality worms. So what benefit the cocoons they have? I just talked about one point about the cocoons. One feature.
Sorry, sir, could you repeat your question? It's actually cutting
I
in.
asked that cocoons that are produced from the worms, एसिना फेटिडा, उनका एक बेनिफिट है अदर वॉर्म्स के ऊपर, वो क्या है? एक लाइन है, जस्ट वन बेनिफिट आई हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट.
Sir, is it because is it because they have a short life cycle and they have high reproductive rates?
That is fine. That is fine. But I just talked about today that Yukta, can you comment upon it if you want to? Yukta not responding. So just one point that I added was that cocoons they can survive in the freezing temperature as well. तो फ्रीजिंग टेम्परेचर में भी कुछ दिन सर्वाइव करके फिर दोबारा ग्रो कर सकते हैं. सो दैट इज द ओनली पॉइंट. सो वुड रिक्वेस्ट यू ऑल टू बी एक्टिवली इन्वॉल्वड इन द क्लास. Try to listen more and put up your questions that you have. So it's for everyone. And just very important thing, देखो कभी कभी नेटवर्क में इशू आता है, नो इश्यूज, बट इफ यू हैव इट एट अ peak that okay the network issues are coming up again and again, try to improve that, otherwise it's not good for you people. So it's just a request again to you all. By that time